Alright, hey darlings, my name's Mina, welcome to my channel MINAREADS, and today we're going to be talking about all 17 books that I read in March. So March was a very busy reading month for me. I'm not sure what possessed me, but I was just on a roll and I was really enjoying pretty much everything that I ended up reading this month. There were only a few like slight disappointments, so let's get into them. Before we do, I do want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Book of the Month. Book of the Month is an online subscription service for readers. How it works is that each month their team vets hundreds of books and provides you with a carefully curated selection of new and early release titles so you can spend more time reading and less time researching. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors to help readers discover new books that they'll love. I am absolutely in love with Book of the Month. I've been working with them for a very long time, but I just think they're a really great service for finding new books and finding new authors to give a chance. I want to mention they have incredible policies, so if for any reason in a given month the selections don't really stick out to you, you can very easily skip a month and not be charged, or you can reserve your credit to use for the next month. It all depends. It's all very customizable. I love that. And they have the best prices for new released hardcover fiction, so you can get your first box for $9.99 if you use my code MINAREADS. And yeah, let me tell you guys about the books that I picked for this month. So I got two. I got Romantic Comedy by Curtis Seidenfeld, and this is about a comedy sketch writer or a sketch comedy writer. She works on a sort of like late night SNL type show, and she ends up meeting this celebrity and they're working on like a sketch together and sparks sort of fly between them. And I'm really excited to read this one. It just sounds like it's going to be so good, so I can't wait to check this one out. And then we have a story that is also a little bit about romance. It's Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler, and this one is about a girl who is deeply in love with someone who's really not the right guy for her, but she's having some trouble with letting go. And this sounds like it's going to be like the perfect read for like troubled 20-somethings. And there's this really beautiful tagline. It says, "When love asks too much of us, how do we find the strength to put ourselves first?" And I just can't wait to dive into this story and see what it's all about. You can check out these books and the other April selections at bookofthemonth.com. The link will be in the description below, and you can use my code MINAREADS. So thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video, and let's get into the rest of this wrap up. I am going to try to organize everything in like categories, and I'll leave them time stamped. So the first category we're going to do is manga and comics. So I read 3 volumes of Saga. I read Saga volume 5 to 7, and I enjoyed them. So if you don't know what Saga is about, it's essentially like this space opera story about these two warring planets named Reef and Landfall, and they have been warring for a very long time. And our two main protagonists, Marco and Alana, are from Reef and Landfall respectively, and they end up falling in love and having a child together. And so their respective governments are trying to track them down and kill them and kill their child, because their child sort of represents this idea of unity after decades and centuries of this war being waged between them that sort of like goes against all of the propaganda that their respective planets have been putting out. And so Alana and Marco are fugitives on the run trying to protect their baby, and each volume follows them on the run, going to a different planet, meeting new people, encountering new dangers, and you know, sort of this family that they're building along the way. Volume is just so interesting, so exciting. It's beautifully illustrated. It's just so fun to read. It's so engaging. The characters are so memorable. It's one of like my favorite comics I've read ever, and it just has so many fascinating characters and character arcs within it, and I just love it. And in the most recent volumes that I've read, they've introduced this character named Petrichor, and I'm obsessed with her. So yeah, love that for me. I'm obsessed with her really bad. So yeah, I read those 3. Then I read 2 volumes of Haikyuu. I read Haikyuu volume 44 and 45, which are the final 2 volumes in the series. Haikyuu is this manga about a high school volleyball team named Karasuno, and so the kids of Karasuno, they are all fighting their way to nationals over the course of this series. And in the 2 volumes that I have read, there's actually a time skip, and so we're following 2 of the like main characters of the series, Hinata and Kageyama, after they have entered the National Professional Volleyball League as adults. And so volumes 44 and 45 are pretty much about them reuniting, but instead of being teammates, they're now on opposing sides of the court. Fun way to close out the series, and I'm so glad that we got to see them as adults and see where everybody ended up. I loved it. It was just like a very satisfactory conclusion to a really good series. And so yeah, I read those 2, very fun. And the last manga that I read was called We're New at This, and it's like a romance manga about this newly married couple, and they were childhood friends who kind of fell in love and they decided to get married. So they're currently on their honeymoon at the start of the manga, and this is essentially about how they are struggling with physical intimacy because they have spent their whole lives being, you know, platonic besties. They feel like they can't figure out how to navigate a physical relationship with each other, and they're just always kind of reading the romantic cues a little bit wrongly. And like, they have two very different kind of communication styles and seduction styles, I guess, and so they're struggling to meet somewhere in the middle to like set a mood for them to consummate their marriage. And that's pretty much what it's about in this first one, and I'm sure it's going to continue on in the following volumes. I don't know if I'll be reading the following volumes because while I do think that it is a slightly interesting concept, I just don't know if I want to read like several volumes of their romantic hijinks and like near misses with this whole sexual relationship. Like, I don't know if I care that much, but it was an interesting concept. And I mean, you know, they were a kind of cute couple, but it's not like a new romance manga that I'm obsessed with. So I would give it maybe like 3 stars. Up next, we're going to talk about the romances that I read. So I read a lot, or kind of a lot of romances. I've got my little handy dandy notebook to refer back to. So let's start with A Walk in the Park by Rebecca Weatherspoon. This is a really short novella. It's like an Audible Plus exclusive. But A Walk in the Park is about these two people. There's essentially a mix-up at this animal shelter where they were both supposed to be getting a dog, but there's been some mix-up in the system, and so they're sort of assigned the same dog, and they decide to co-parent this dog. And so it's about them co-parenting the dog, and over the course of this co-parenting, they end up falling in love with each other. And so yeah, it's about them like dating and getting to know each other and stuff like that, and they're really cool characters. Their dog is very adorable, and it was nice to read about. I would recommend it as something like sweet, fun, and easy to read, like, I don't know, on a morning walk or on your morning commute to work or something like that, because it's very, very short and it's very sweet and wholesome and everything like that. But it's not like, it's not too meaty. Like I said, it's a novella. It's really short. I think the audiobook is like maybe 2 hours long. So yeah, I don't have like a whole bunch of thoughts about it, but I did think it was really cute. Then I read Restore Me by J.L. Seegers, and this was on my March TBR. And Restore Me is a romance about this widow, essentially. This widow, she is currently trying to get her groove back. It's been about 5 years since her husband passed away, and she's feeling like she's ready to kind of get back out there on the dating scene. And essentially she ends up secretly dating her husband's best friend, whose name is Dominic. And so Dominic has secretly been pining for her for a very long time, and it's about them like exploring a romantic and sexual connection with each other. So they kind of start like a friends with benefits sort of thing that transitions into like an epic love affair. And this is a really interesting, like, very emotionally nuanced romance, because there's a lot of stuff going on for our main female protagonist, Sloane, because she's feeling a lot of guilt and trepidation about being with Dominic, knowing that he was her late husband's best friend, and like knowing that their social circles are like very closely tied together. So she's afraid of what her husband's family will think, because she's still very close with them. And it's like, it's a very emotionally fraught experience for Sloane, but she has a lot of love for Dominic, and so it's very like angsty in that regard. And then Dominic is a little bit weird, I have to say. Dominic is a little bit strange. He definitely needs to be in therapy. He's a little bit obsessive and possessive, and I fear that I like that, but some people won't. But I enjoyed it so much. So he is all about Sloane, and he kind of met Sloane before Sloane ever met her husband, and so he has been sort of in love with her since college days, but he didn't ever want to get in the way of the relationship that she had with her husband Eric. And so now that Sloane is kind of getting back out there, Dominic wants to seize his chance to maybe put his name in the ring as somebody that she could potentially see herself with. And so it's a complicated romantic web, and I enjoyed untangling all of these different threads. I had a really good time with it, and I just thought it was just really intense and sexy and romantic, and I loved it. I love a good, intense, sort of angsty romance, and I feel like it delivered that for me. So I had a great time with it. Alright, then I read Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert, and this was an incredible romance. I gave this 5 stars. I am not someone who typically reads YA. Y'all know me. I am a sugar spice and everything nice kind of girly, but definitely not like here for YA. You know what I'm saying? I am an adult romance girly, but I decided to give it a shot because I love Talia Hibbert and I want to kind of read everything that she's ever put out. And so I gave this a shot and it was so excellent. I would also highly recommend the audiobook if you can, because I feel like the line delivery done by the audiobook narrators was just so good that it made all the jokes land like even more. So I would recommend that, but that's besides the point. This is about 2 characters, Celine and Bradley. They used to be besties in childhood, and in high school they sort of drifted apart to different social circles. They have beef because they feel like their friendship breakup was just so unfair, and so this is about them having to work together or be in proximity with one another while they are attempting to do this sort of wilderness explorer thing that could potentially earn them both a scholarship. So they're kind of competing against each other, kind of working on the same team, and in so doing they sort of reconnect, rekindle their friendship, and also realize that they have like romantic feelings for each other. And it is very, very good. It is so, I think that the characters are so good. Like, the characters are fantastic. They're so funny. I think that Bradley Graham is one of my most beloved characters maybe ever. I just loved him so much. I thought he was such an interesting person and he was so funny and I adored him. And Celine was great too, and I loved their dynamic together, and I just feel like it was such a fulfilling romance for me. And I didn't expect to feel like all of those big feelings about a YA romance, but I did. I loved it so much, and I'm highly recommending it. But yeah, like, it was good. They had great chemistry. It was full of a ton of laughs for me, and I enjoyed it. I think that Talia for me is the queen of a rom-com because she gets the calm part right. It's actually funny. Like, the comedy is there. Not many rom-com authors can say the same. Alright, so after that, I read Cravings by Sean, and this is a romance novella about these 2 characters whose names I have already forgot. Gabe and Zaria, maybe? This is a romance novella about Gabe and Zaria. They pretty much have a chance meeting at a movie theater, and this is sort of a sparks fly, kind of a soulmates sort of energy that the author is trying to evoke. It's very insta-lovey, and pretty much they just start dating after this chance meeting. And so the story, which is about 130 pages, is mostly just various scenes of them doing the horizontal tango. And y'all know I love erotica. I love spice. Y'all know me. You all know the vibes, right? And I think the spice was very well done. It was also really cool because they have like a mutual praise kink, which was cool. I've never seen that in another book, and I enjoyed it a lot, okay? But I will say that I felt a little bit slighted by this book. I have to be honest with you, because this is the longest book in this series. This is a part of the Kingstown novella series. This is the longest book in that series, and I feel like with that, we could have gotten so much more like emotional development, but we don't actually get to see any of the emotional development. We don't get to see any of their sweet moments. We don't get to see any of their dates, although we're told about a lot of them. We just get to see them in bed together. It was so, I feel robbed, right? Because there are so many moments where we're like just on the cusp of seeing them do something outside of the bedroom, but then the author just sort of snatches that away from us. So like, for example, they go on this date to like a candle shop, and so we're there on the date, but instead of seeing the date play out, we are in the bathroom, and the girl, Zaria, is thinking about the date and how it was such a nice date. And then afterwards, her and the guy go home and they're banging. Or we see like there's a moment where the guy, he's being given some kind of accolades or whatever, and instead of getting to see like the award ceremony which she's attending with him, we don't see that, and it just kind of flips over to the next scene of them banging. There's a scene that's supposed to be like really, I would say, very pivotal, because Zaria is the family member of some of the other characters in the series, and so she has been keeping her relationship a secret for a really long time, and she finally decides that she's going to like debut her relationship at this yacht party that her family is holding. We don't see the yacht party. We don't see him meeting her family or her friends, you know, and I just feel like for me it didn't work. Like, I sometimes like when a romance is done a lot in isolation, but I feel like it didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way, and I think that if the whole story was just going to be them banging, which is totally fine, I think it could have been shorter. I don't think we needed 130 pages of them knocking boots. I really don't believe that. So I gave it 3 stars. I think if you are seeking solely very well written spice scenes. You will enjoy this, you will appreciate it, but I felt like I wanted a little bit of something in between all of the spice. And I know that this is like, I'm harping on and on and on about it, but I just felt like it had such potential for me. It had such potential and I feel disappointed by it. So I don't know, but that is what it is. Okay, The Companion by E.E. Ottoman. This is a historical polyamorous romance between these three trans protagonists. They're pretty much living this sort of cottagecore lifestyle in the boonies of New York State, and they are just spending time together, being creative, and living a life of leisure together. And it's just like a really sweet, simple slice of life sort of story, and I loved it so much. I thought it was really beautiful. I thought it was really effectively conveyed. It felt very comforting and cozy and sweet and romantic, and I loved it. It gave me all of the things that I really wanted from it, and I enjoyed it a great deal. Then I read Yours Insatiably by Aveda Weiss, and let me grab my copy because I want you guys to see this cover. Like, I want you to see it and I want you to appreciate it because this cover is so beautiful. And essentially we're following these two monster protagonists named Avrin and Pi. Avrin is a succubus and Pi is like a fairy moth person that has tentacles. It's a whole thing. Pretty much Avrin and Pi work together at this museum library place, and they work together. They have work beef. Some stuff and things happen where they end up hooking up via this like monster matchmaking app, and now they're trying to figure out if they can continue on with their platonic I hate you coworker relationship, or if they're going to give in to their more carnal desires towards each other. And this is a very, very fun monster romance. I enjoyed them a lot. They were great. Then I read Sing Me to Sleep by R.M. Virtues, and this is a, what is it? This is another monster romance. This is about a girl and her sleep paralysis demon. This girl, she has some trauma. Recently her house was broken into and she's like lots of dreams about this home invasion, and it's, you know, been making it very hard for her to sleep. And now, to make matters worse, she has begun to be visited by this like sleep paralysis demon that is very scary. But I come to find out the sleep paralysis demon is not necessarily scary and more so sexy, and her and the sleep paralysis demon start hooking up and some stuff and things happen from there. There's sort of like a whole involved plot, but does the plot really matter? No, they're hooking up a whole lot and there's some plot things happening in the background, and yeah, it's about her falling in love with the sleep paralysis demon. It was a fun time. I enjoyed it pretty much. What else? Alright, so then I read Heart Haunt Havoc, which is a horror romance novella, and it is about these two characters, Colin and Bishop, and essentially Bishop lives in a very, very haunted house, and so we follow Colin as he is investigating Bishop's home and trying to figure out what is haunting the house and why. And over the course of this investigation, Colin and Bishop sort of fall into a relationship with one another, and I love this. I absolutely adored the writing style in this. I just love the atmosphere. It was like incredibly evocative, and I felt like the imagery was just so good, and I loved it. Like, I think I really do enjoy like a haunted house, like gothic sort of story, but I think I needed to be in a more compact narrative like this one was, because it was a novella, maybe like 170-ish pages. But I feel like it's not something that I want to read for like 300, 400 pages, but like 150, 170 something pages was like the perfect sweet spot for me. And I just enjoyed reading about these characters in this world and like the magic that they have so much. And apparently this is going to be part of like a anthology series that I definitely am eagerly anticipating the follow-ups for. This is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and this book was a little bit of a disappointment for me. This is a story about this cafe that allows people to time travel. It has these very strict rules around the time travel, but we follow 3 or 4 different characters who go back in time to experience some sort of like revelation, and it sort of changes the way that they see the world, the way they see their circumstances, and it's supposed to be a bit like an emotionally moving, thought-provoking sort of novel. And I have to say that for me personally, I did not love it. I didn't feel like, I don't know, I just feel like maybe it just didn't really speak to me. There were a few moments in this that I enjoy. There's a particular story in this that's called The Sisters, and I felt like I really enjoyed that one, but for the most part I wasn't the hugest fan of this. Alright, so then I read The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty, and this is about a retired pirate captain named Amina, and she is telling her life story to this biographer named Jamal. And so the narrative is interesting because there are moments where, you know, you're very in the moment with the adventure that Amina is on, and then sometimes the narration kind of pulls back and she's interacting with the interviewer Jamal, and it's very interestingly narrated, and I enjoyed that a whole lot. I really liked Amina's voice as a character. I found her to be like very funny, and I enjoyed like her sardonic sense of humor. I really like the characters in this and the character dynamics between Amina and her crew, and also Amina and her husband, who is like this demon guy. Like, I was obsessed. Their dynamic is so funny, and I love them. I love them like so much. And I think that the adventure that the characters go on, the plot is a little bit, I don't want to say it's stereotypical, but Amina is attempting to recover this like kidnapped girl, and so as she's attempting to recover the girl, the adventure just sort of gets more and more complicated as time goes on, and it ends up being one of those stories where, you know, they have to like track down this magical MacGuffin to save the world and stuff like that. So the plot was fine. I enjoyed it, but I think what really stood out the most for me with this series, or not the series, but with the book, was Amina as a protagonist. I really enjoyed her. I really enjoyed her voice, and I just found it fun and exciting to hear what she had to say about the stuff she was going through, more so than the stuff itself. But it was very fun, very adventurous, and it has some ties back to the Daevabad trilogy, which y'all know that I love. So I had a good time reading this. I gave this 4 stars. It was a good time, and I definitely will be reading the sequels. Let me know if you read this and what did you rate it. I would love to hear that in the comments below, because I feel like among my friend group it has been a little bit of a polarizing read, but based on a Goodreads average rating, everybody's loving it, and I'm with the everybody. I really loved it, but some of my Goodreads friends were not impressed. So let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. So the last book that I have to tell you about is called The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, and I absolutely adored this book. I think this may have been one of my favorite books of the month, and it was a total surprise for me. I ended up reading this on the recommendation of Elliot from Elliot Brooks. I had to check it out because I hadn't heard too many people talking about this book recently. It was sort of popular on BookTube a few years ago, and this is a fantasy series, or not series, but this is a fantasy story about this emperor named Maya. And so essentially Maya is like the 4th forgotten child of this elven king, and he is half goblin, and so goblins are not like looked on very kindly in this elven kingdom. So he is, like I said, a shunned 4th son, and essentially this horrible airship accident happens because this is sort of like a steampunk fantasy. So this horrible airship tragedy strikes, and his father and his 3 brothers are killed, and so now he is the next person in line for the throne, and so he very quickly has to assume the role of emperor, and he goes from living in some backwater to being the sovereign of this nation, and having to figure out the politics and the courtly intrigue of this place that is very much, you know, hostile towards him. This is very heavy on the politics. We get to see Maya step into the role of emperor and decide on what kind of like public policy he's going to decide on, and it's really about him stepping into this role as like a part of the government when he was very much not prepared for any of this over the course of his life. And it's just so interesting for me. I love a good political fantasy, and I loved Maya as a protagonist. He was very kind-hearted, and it just made you want to root for him, and I loved him. I loved him and like his staff and the people that he was surrounding himself with. And it's a really difficult story because Maya is very isolated because of his political position. Even the people that he wants to trust, he kind of can't, and so it's a very like, it's a lot of like emotional push and pull there. I loved it a whole lot. I thought that it was just a really great time, and yeah, like it exceeded my expectations on all levels, and I can't stop thinking about it. And I think one thing that I want to mention, if you are going to read this, I kind of want to recommend this to you as an audiobook, because a lot of world building for the book is done linguistically. I don't know how to fully describe this, but like the elven goblin language that the characters are using has different syntax and grammatical structure than English does. The grammatical structure that they use is a little bit different. The naming structure that they use is very different, and so there are a lot of like fantasy names that are going to be really, really difficult to describe, or not describe, but to pronounce, and so it might be helpful to listen to the audiobook to get your bearings. And there are a lot of characters in it, and everybody's name sounds completely incomprehensible, right? So I would say that it's like helpful to have the audiobook narrator like helping you along the way because of the slightly difficult linguistic elements of what's going on. And there's a lot of linguistic world building being done, so we have like a really strong sense of what their elven language is supposed to sound like, even though we're reading the story in English, which is something that I love. And I think that Catherine Addison is like a fucking genius, and I enjoyed that so much. So beyond me nerding out about linguistics and fantasy, it's just like a very, very interesting world, a very compelling protagonist, and I loved it. I loved it so much. There are a few more books in this world, but they don't follow our protagonist Maya. They follow some other side character dude, and I will be reading those hopefully soon. But it was just a great reading experience. Like, I loved it so much. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in March. Let me know what was your favorite read from March. I'd love to hear about that in the comments. And also let me know what your thoughts were on The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi if you've read it already. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in my next one. Bye, you guys.